It's Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher. And recently I've been exploring some of the ideas of this book, Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. It's a book on exploring consciousness. And much of the time, what brings one to explore consciousness, some of us have a natural curiosity for human potential, and that pulls us into there. Sometimes it's from experiencing a state of pain as a perpetual state and wanting to shift that, wondering if there's any more to life and if there's a way to shift this perpetual feeling of pain and frustration that seems to be the state one seems to engage in for most of their time in their waking hours. And sometimes it's a little bit of both. The curiosity for human potential and then not being satisfied where one is at leads you to explore other perspectives. And he assigns sort of numerical values to different emotional states and kind of uses a quantitative approach and is coming from this approach of quantum energy and then the emotions, these feelings being different expressions of that state. My brain kind of works the opposite way. I work more in the non-measurable way. I work more in the state of feeling and perceiving, and more of the artistic state. But I do find value. Sometimes I still think like his ideas and these values sort of mapping and putting values. And there is definitely a lot of value to do that because it lays out something in front of you. And I think a lot of his ideas are great, very, very solid. I've experienced truth in them in my own shifts. But he has this map of consciousness, and on the bottom we have emotions such as shame, despair, apathy, vindictiveness. And on the top we have emotions such as joy, love, acceptance. And then the very top is enlightenment, which is really a dissolution of the ego and the point of ego, where one dissolves into the 0 point, into the oneness with God. And essentially that would be the place of transcending the human experience. And some of us, we have these moments of transcendence where we feel that freedom and joy and bliss. Well, according to Hawkins, those are lower emotions than this one transcendence, which words really cannot explain. But my belief is the human experience, and part of the calling of the human experience is to experience all of it, all of these emotions, this full spectrum, this full bandwidth. But we want to be in the higher states. We want the higher states to be our perpetual state. We want to be where apathy, shame, guilt, vindictiveness, where this is not our standard state that we engage in life from as our default, where occasionally we might feel joy or compassion or even acceptance, but most of the time we stay in these lower states. The idea is to be in the higher states of bliss, of joy, of acceptance as your standard state of peace. And what I find is sometimes we might have this big moment that triggers us if we're in a lower state that just wakes us up to a new possibility of living. But to actually shift and maintain a higher state of consciousness, it takes considerable effort on our parts, mostly because we are wired to what we're already doing. We've gotten familiar with our behavior and our thoughts. These pathways have been created in our brains and bodies, and they want to go back to these default pathways. Everything wants to go back there, and to go into this higher or this different pathway, it requires initially more effort on our part to cultivate the thought patterns, the focus and the attention of the mind to make different choices with our behavior and to choose to direct our attention to other places than where it's wanting to go. That takes considerable effort. And then sometimes again, the shift can simply be from the state of being sick of where one is at and say, I'm willing to do the work, but this is what I want to impart on you. Consciousness takes considerable effort. To climb the ladder to the next rung takes considerable effort. Then you'll hit a point to where you will relax into a new pathway, a new state of being for a bit, and then at some point you may want to climb to the next rung. And this is a slow process. It takes time. And a lot of times people, when they're looking just to simply raise their vibration or change, to jump from a lower state way up to a higher state, it is asking too much and it's unrealistic. And people get disappointed because they don't get to this high state. They go back down to that low state. And again, there is some teeter-totter as well. When you're going up to a higher rung, you'll go back down a little, but as long as you're getting up into that higher state, that is how this evolution or this ascension of consciousness actually works. And sometimes, again, occasionally, like what I found in 2019 and 2020, the Earth as a whole was getting these hits of cosmic rays. There was cosmic energy coming in, and the whole planet got a massive boost in consciousness, which, we're seeing this in some of this polarization, but what I see is this consciousness did come in, and there has been an attempt to redirect that consciousness so that humanity does not level up and does not receive that big boost, but it's here right now. And we got that, and now it's back to where the ball's in our court is to do the work, do our individual work to gradually keep elevating our own state. So managing the process of consciousness and your expectations of what you're doing, I think, is essential to avoid some of the pitfalls of frustration that go with this work to one who is committed on this path. And having high expectations of yourself, having firm expectations of yourself, but also being able to forgive yourself and allow yourself to take some breaks and to understand again how this process works. And that's sort of how you can arrange the structure of your day around the moments. When do you need to be the most conscious for what activities, and then when can you let go? And it's going to be a dance of both. And again, what you find if you stay on this path long enough, you will get to that higher state of consciousness, and it's not as high of an effort on your part to remain in that state. So if you're shifting from apathy up to courage, then once you've done the work initially, what that might look like is putting yourself in acts that require emotional input on your part, and putting yourself at risk, putting yourself at the risk of being disliked, of being embarrassed. And when you go and put yourself out there in these ways, it's a lot of work at first because you haven't cultivated the trait of courage, but eventually it becomes your natural state, and it doesn't require as much energy. And again, putting yourself out there for things that are meaningful. And that's an example from that particular wrong of what it looks, what that could look like. That being said, I'm going to end this video. Be strong, be well, my friends, and I will see you on the other side.